Hi, and welcome to this section of the Algebra Word Problem Tutor, where we're going to do word problems that deal with interest. Okay, and we're going to deal with problems that talk about money that grows with time. Okay, so you've all heard this. You've got credit card interest, you've got interest on a house loan, you've got interest on different kinds of loans you might take out, and you also have interest from money that you invest in a good savings account or in the stock market or something like this, and it's almost always expressed in terms of a percent. So you know that interest has something to do with a percent, and you know that somehow the money grows, okay? So in all of these problems, that's going to be the common theme here. You're going to have some money that you're investing, and the money is going to grow, and we're going to deal with the word problems that deal with that. So the first thing we need to do is recall a few things. These are things that you may or may not have learned in other math classes, and if you haven't, I'm going to show you right here. Okay, the interest that you earn, which is the money that you earn from an investment, or the money that you earn from your money being in a good savings account that draws interest. The interest is the money that you earn, and that's called I. Okay, so I is the interest. Okay, the interest, which is just simply another word that means money earned. Okay. Okay, the interest is equal to P, which is the principal. Okay, the principal, which is just simply another word that means money invested. Okay, so it's the principal times something called R, which is, you all know that somehow the interest rate has to be involved. And we'll just call it the interest rate. Alrighty, interest rate. And it also has to do with the time. And we'll talk about this here in just a second, the time. All right, first thing I want to say before we go any farther is that this very, very simple formula, interest earned is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. It's called a simple interest formula, okay? Because in real life, when you're talking about real money invested in a real money market fund or interest on your car loan or whatever, it isn't really quite using this particular formula here. You deal with compounding interest and how often the money is compounded and things like this. This is called simple interest, and it's very useful to illustrate the main point. If you have some money, okay, if you have some money called the principal, you give the bank $1,000, okay, and the bank is going to say that, well, you're going to have a certain rate of interest that you're going to grow that money, like maybe a 5% or a 2% rate of interest, okay, and then you have to leave the money in the bank for a certain length of time, maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Then this formula, just by multiplying those three numbers together, and by the way, it's very important, time is going to be in years for this simple interest formula to work, okay? Then when you multiply these things together, you're going to get a number back that's going to be the interest, okay, on the money that you actually earn. So the first actual word problem goes something like this. You make two investments, okay? One investment pays 7% and the other investment pays 5%, okay? If you invest $12,000 and the interest after 1 year is $760, then what are the amounts of each investment that you made, okay? So again, you have two investments, different interest rates. One pot of money is growing at 7%, other pot of money is growing at 5%, but after, if you invest a total amount of money of $12,000 split between these two investments, right, and at the end of the year it's $760 that you get out, then how much money did you actually invest in either pot? How did you split that money up to begin with? That's what the real question is. So in these problems, when you know you're dealing with interest, I always like to write the equation down again, PRT, principal times rate times time. This is the interest earned, okay? So you have two investments, okay, that we're going to talk about here. You have investment A, I'm just going to call the first pot, at 7% interest, okay? And you have investment B at 5% interest. Okay, now we put so much money in A and so much money in B, and they grow at different rates, and in the end of the day, we have an interest of $760 that we've actually earned. And we're trying to figure out how much money did we put in A and how much money did we put in B. So the variable A is going to represent how much money we put in A, and the variable B is going to represent how much money we put into B. Okay, so the first thing to sort of remember is if I put A dollars into here and B dollars into here, A and B are related because B, okay, is just simply equal to 12,000 minus A. That's the first equation. Okay, that's the first equation because the problem says your total investment was $12,000. So that means A plus B must be equal to 12,000. So you can see this is A plus B, moving this A over. A plus B is equal to 12,000. So if I invest 12,000 total, then B is going to simply equal 12,000 minus whatever I put into A. Okay, so B and A are related because I've told you how much money I'm putting into the system here. Okay, so that was the easy equation. Okay, now we're going to write the slightly more complicated equation. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an equation for how much interest I've earned. Okay, if I put so many dollars into A, which is what A represents, how many dollars I put in, at 0.07, which is 7%, because it's at 7%, and we said that it's at the end of 1 year we're doing this. It says right here, if you invest $12,000, the interest after 1 year is $760. So I'm putting 1 year in for the time. Okay, plus however much money I put in for B times B's growth rate, 0.05, okay, again times 1 year. And then these two amounts of interest that I've grown have got to equal 760 because the problem says that at the end of the first year I've earned $760 total, okay. So this is how much I've earned in A, PRT. This is how much I've earned by putting B in, PRT, principal rate time, okay. Now, notice I've already got an equation that expresses B in terms of A, so I'm going to use that. A times, and now since this is 0.07 times 1, I'm just going to multiply that out, 0.07, plus, for B, I'm going to substitute 12,000 minus A times 0.05, and then times the 1, so the 1 kind of disappears, is equal to 760. Okay, now I just need to solve this equation for A. So what I need to do here is go ahead and expand this and distribute that 0.05 in. A times 0.07 plus 0.05 times the 12,000 is going to be 600 minus A times 0.05 and then simply equal to 760 on the right. So here, this is exactly the same, and then the only thing I did here was I distribute this 0.05 into the 12,000, giving me 600, and then this times the negative A is just going to be written down here, and then the right-hand side stays the same. Now I can add these two terms of A times 0.02 plus 600 is equal to 760, okay? And then I can move this 600 over here by subtraction. 0.02 is equal to, subtract 600 from both sides. Okay, A times 0.02 is just going to equal 160. Okay, and then to solve for A, I just divide both sides by 0.02. And on the left, 0.02 divided by 0.02 gives me 1. That's why it disappears. And on the right, I'm just dividing just like this. So in the end, A, which you remember is the amount of money I put into investment A, is $8,000. Okay? That's how much money I put into A. And so then B, we've got an equation for B. Just plug it right back in. B is equal to 12,000 minus A. B is 12,000 minus 8,000. We just found A. So then B is going to be $4,000. Okay, so you see these problems are really no different than the rest. It's just you got to know what this interest stuff means. Well, what we're doing is we're just writing an equation for how much money A earns and how much money B earns in interest, and total interest in the year was given here, and then we use these two equations to kind of bang through it and find out how much money we put into A and how much money we put into B. Okay, so the next problem says Sally invested $7,000. Part of that money went into 5.5% interest, some account 5.5% interest, and the rest was only at 4%, okay? If the interest earned total after 2 years, after 1 year, was $310, find the amount of each investment. So again, you have $7,000, Part of it's put in at 5.5%, part of it's put in at 4%. Don't know how much goes to which bank account, but we know that we split that money up somehow, okay? And after 1 year, the total interest was $310. How much did we invest in each bank account? So same thing, we know we're dealing with investments, so the interest is going to equal to the principal times the rate times the time. Okay, we're going to call amount A is what we put in at 5.5% interest, and we're going to call amount B what we put in at 4% interest. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our equation for how much interest we earn. Okay, PRT, principal would be A, that's how much money I put into A, times the rate, 0.055, which is 5.5% in decimal form. Just 5.5 divided by 100, and you'll get the decimal there. And it's after 1 year, so the time is going to be 1 year, okay, plus however much money I put into B times 0.04 for that interest rate times the same year. And the total amount of interest I earned after that time is $310. So the same thing as before. I've got an equation with amount A and amount B, okay? But again, I know how A and B are tied together, because I know that amount A plus amount B is equal to $7,000, because I was told in the beginning that Sally invested $7,000. That means part of her $7,000 went into A and part of it went into B. So A plus B must be equal to $7,000. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this for B. 7,000 minus A. Just subtract A from both sides. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to plug it right back into this equation. I'm going to do that right down here. A times 0.055 times 1, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that off now because it's just times 1, plus B is given by 7,000 minus A times 0.04 times the 1, but I'm going to leave that alone, is equal to the 310. Okay? So now I can just continue simplifying and solving this just like before. A times 0.055 plus, now I can distribute this 0.04 times 7,000, and the 0.04 times 7,000 is going to be 280, minus A times 0.04 is equal to 310. This 0.04 times the 7,000 gives me the 280. 0.04 times negative A, I just keep that. I don't really do anything with it. I keep it there. And then you keep the right hand side exactly as it was. So now I can add these two terms together. Okay, and I'm going to get A times 0.015, because 0.055 minus 0.04 is going to give me that, plus 280 is equal to 310. So then simplifying that further, trying to get A all by itself, I'll subtract 280 from both sides, 310 minus 280. So then A times 0.15 is equal to 310 minus 280 is going to be 30. And then A is just going to be equal to, divide both sides by 0.015. So A is going to be equal to $2,000. So $2,000 is how much she put into account A, and then to find B, just go ahead and plug it back into another formula here, 7,000 minus A. So it's 7,000 minus, whoops, that's 70,000, that's not right. 7,000 minus the 2,000, okay. And so then B is going to be equal to just simply 5,000. Okay, so you can see that the total investment in the beginning was 7,000, and when you put 2,000 at this 5.5%, and you put this 5,000 at the 4%, then after 1 year you will earn an interest of $310. Okay, so you're really just writing equations that deal with interest and summing them up. If they tell you the total interest earned is so many dollars, then you're going to basically sum the individual little interests up to equal what they tell you it should equal. Okay. The next one's just a little bit more thought, but really not terribly much more. You invest, this is the next problem, you invest twice as much in stocks at 4% as you did in bonds paying 6%. If you earned a total of $700 interest in 1 year, $700 interest in 1 year, how much money did you invest in each? So this is very similar, except they have this one sentence at the top that says you invest twice as much in stocks at 4% as you did at bonds at 6%. So that's a little bit different than what we've had. But the same thing really applies. You have this interest is equal to this principal times this rate times this time. Okay, that's the big picture. Okay, so if you invest S dollars in stock, and stock is at 4%, and you invest B dollars in bonds at 6%. Okay, so we're using two variables, S and B. First sentence you read, it says you invest twice as much in stocks as you do in bonds. So that must be that the stocks, the number of dollars that I invest in stocks must be 2 times the number of dollars I invest in bonds, because it says right here you invest twice as much in stocks. Okay, so that means I have more stocks, right? So however many bonds I'm investing, times 2 is how many in stocks. I'm investing more stocks, twice as much in stock. Okay, so that's the first equation. And then the second one is just a straight up interest calculation saying that you earn $700 in interest in the year. So let's go ahead and bang through that. However many dollars that I invest in stocks times the interest rate, which is 0.04, times the 1 year, that's how much interest I earn in stocks, plus how many dollars in bonds times 0.06, which is the number of dollars that I earn in account B, this interest rate times the same amount of time. That's equal to 700. That's what we were saying. $700 is how much interest I earn. But now I know that S is equal to 2B, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to plug it in right here. So 2B times 0.04 times 1, but I'm going to kind of get rid of that now because I'm multiplying by 1, plus B times 0.06 is simply equal to 700. Okay? Now, in order to simplify this, I'm going to go ahead and multiply this 2 in. It's just going to make things a little bit easier. So that's going to be B times 0.08. 2 times 0.04 gives me 0.08, plus B times 0.06 is equal to 700. And now I can add these together because it's the same variable B, and I can just add the numbers. So B times 0.14 is equal to 700. Okay? And then finally, to find B, I can just divide 700 divided by 0.14, divide both sides by the 0.14. And so then in the end, B is going to equal $5,000. That's how much I invested in B at 6%. And in order to find A, you just, same thing as always, you take it and you plug it back into your other equation that you had. S is equal to 2B. So S is equal to 2 times 5,000. So S is equal to $10,000. So same thing as before. This problem is the same. You're writing an equation in interest. Okay. The only difference is that we said at the beginning there that you invested twice as much in stocks and bonds, and so it kind of changed the problem just a little bit. Okay, the next problem says you have $1,300 less invested at 9% than you have invested at 5%. The total yearly interest is $219. How much do you have invested at each rate? Okay, so this is worded a little bit different than before. I have $1,300 less invested at 9% than I do have invested at 5%. Total yearly interest is $219. How much do I have invested in each rate? So same story as before. The interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. Okay, and I'm going to let the variable A equal how much I have invested at the 9%, and B, I'm going to have how much I invested at the lower rate of 5%. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Now the first part of the problem, the first sentence says right here, I have $1,300 less invested at 9% than I do have at 5%. So that is an equation right there, and what it's saying is this right here. Okay, what it's saying is, let's read it again. I have $1,300 less invested at the 9% rate, okay, than I do at the other rate. So here you can see that the A rate, which is the 9%, I have less of it. I've less invested at this rate because whatever I have invested in B, I take $1,300 off of that. That's what I have invested in A. So you can see that the money I have invested in A is $1,300 less than I have invested in B, and that's exactly what the first part of the problem is saying. And then after this little statement, which is really just the first part of the problem, the rest of it just follows exactly like the other problems. We're going to write an equation in interest. So the amount I have invested in A times the interest rate of A times the 1 year plus B times the amount I have invested in B times the 1 year is equal to the $219 in the year. Okay, that's exactly what that is. Okay, but now I'm going to use my equation that I have here in terms of A, and I'm going to substitute that in. I'm going to say B minus 1300, 1300, that's A, times 0.09 times 1, so I'm going to leave them out, plus B times 0.05 is equal to $219. So now I have an equation in B and I can solve that. So let's distribute this 0.09 in. 0.09 times B is just simply B times 0.09. You can't really do much with it. Minus 1300 times 0.09 is going to be 117. Okay, 1300 times 0.09 is 117, plus B times 0.05 is equal to 219. Okay? Okay, so the next thing I can do is I can collect terms here and I can add the B's together. So B times 0.14, 0.09 plus 0.05 is 0.14. Minus 117 is equal to 219. And now I'm going to move this 117 over. B times 0.14 is equal to 219 plus 117. I'm going to add the 117. It's going to cancel with this. It's going to add on to the right-hand side. So then finally I'm going to have B times 0.14 is equal to 219 plus 117 is 336. Okay? And then in order to find the B, I'm going to have 336 divided by 0.14. I'm just going to divide the two, divide by both sides by 0.14, and then so the B, the amount that I invested in B is $2,400. $2,400. And then to find A, I just plug it back into the other equation I have. A is equal to B minus 1,300, so it's 2,400 minus 1,300. And then so A is going to be 1,100. Okay, so again, this is the same as before. It's just that that first statement's a little bit different, and after that you're just doing the same thing as before. You're writing an equation in terms of the interest that you have, and you're equating it to the total amount of interest that you have altogether, and using the two equations and two unknowns to solve it. So here's the final problem. It says you have $3,000 invested at 6% interest. How much should you invest at 4% to have a yearly interest income of $372? Okay, so this is a little bit different. I have $3,000 invested at 6%. Okay, so I know I'm going to write this down. This is what I currently have. $3,000 invested at 6%. Okay, and it's asking me how much should I invest at 4%. So I'm going to say X is invested at 4%. I don't know how much money is invested in 4%. That's what I'm trying to find. And I want my yearly interest income to equal 372. So I know I'm going to have to write an interest equation. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. I invest this much at 6%, and I invest this much at 4%, which is unknown. And let's just see where it takes us. The $3,000 that I put in times the interest that it's invested in, 0.06, times the 1 year, because we said it's a yearly interest we're interested in, plus X dollars invested at 4% times a year, and we said we want a yearly interest of $372. So you see, this equation this problem doesn't even have two equations and two unknowns. I can solve for X right here, and that's what I'm going to do, exactly what I'm going to do. 3,000 times 0.06 is, in your calculator, 180, plus X times 0.04 is equal to 372. Okay? Now I'm going to move the 180 over here. So I'm going to be left with x times 0.04 is equal to 372 minus 180. Disappears from the left because I'm subtracting it from the left. Subtract it from both sides. And so you just subtract it on the right-hand side. And so it's going to be equal to 372 minus 180, and so you're going to be left with 192. Okay, in your calculator. And then to find x, you just divide both sides by the 0.04. 192 divided by 0.04. And so in the end, 192 divided by 0.04 is $4,800. That's how much money you'd have to invest at 4% to make your goal happen, which your goal is to make $372. So again, these problems are simple interest formulas. These are simple interest, looking at a yearly basis, how much money you'd earn in a year with a simple interest formula. You know, you can't really totally apply them to real-life credit cards and real-life loans because real-life credit cards and real-life loans are compounded, and that just means calculated differently than a yearly basis. But for these kinds of problems where you're talking about a yearly basis, how much money would you earn in a year at a simple interest type of rate, these problems work just fine. And you just need to look at using the equation you have for interest and setting up the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Usually most problems will tell you that you earn a total amount of interest of so many dollars. So you write your equation to do that. Sometimes you have two equations depending on how it's worded, and just solve your two equations just like we have been in all of the other sections.